Okay, so before we get into the discussion of the right line that I'm gonna be covering today, I have a confession. I'm not the biggest fan of Coral. You see, I am more of a Prism guy myself, but I do aware of the influence Coral has in the fanbase. Not in the competitive sense, of course, especially how they kind of butcher Coral back in V as well. So I am very excited to see Coral playstyle from the OG back to the normal, while still have a remnants of what we actually left Coral with. And I'll say this now, I kind of get it why a lot of people are a big fan of this right line, especially considering you have to run the original Coral to make a full utilization of the whole right line. I hope that's a good enough of a transition, as we're gonna be immediately start off with the first part of the right line, and that is Fresh Star Coral. This unit has two very interesting skills where when rolled upon by Shiny Star Coral, the grade 2, look at top 7 card of your deck, choose up to 1 card with Coral in its name or up to 1 grade 3 unit among them, review it and put into hand and shuffle the deck. And then auto, when this card is put into so by ability of your grade 3 or greater Coral Vanguard, choose one of your Vanguard, it gets plus 5k until end of turn. If your opponent is grade 3 or greater, it also gets triple drive until end of turn.
It's amazing!
This is great. Like, okay, yes, it gives triple drive rather than drive plus 1, which means that you can actually utilize cards like Elementaria to get away from it, but I feel this is good in most of the situation, especially considering how much power Coral normally gives to your rare card. The first skill is not bad as well, as you either fetch a Coral card or up to 1 grade 3 card, which in my opinion makes Coral one of the best generic right line we have seen so far. And if you guys wondering why, I'm gonna be talking about it right now with Shiny Star Coral. This unit has two skills as well, where when this unit attacks, choose one of your rare card and you may return it to hand. And then auto, when this card is put into sword by ability of your grade 3 or greater Coral Vanguard, draw a card, energy charge 1, choose one of your rare card plus 5k until end of turn.
That's it?
Shiny Star's second ability is not as strong as the Fresh Star, but I do think it is a necessity occasionally, especially considering how much energy Coral do use. And the first skill is a reason why I'm saying Coral is, in my opinion, one of the best generic right line right now. And in case you guys are wondering, there are currently 3 different right line that are considered generic, which is the Vilista right line, Astasis right line or the Kyrie right line, and Coral right line. Coral right line is good when you want to run decks that do run a lot of grade 3, or you want to get a little bit of early game because of the Fresh Star ability to fetch not just any specific grade 3 but all grade 3 in general, which makes this a lot flexible. But overall, I think this is heavily dependent on what the deck actually needs, so I do still think Vilista is still the best, but Coral is a close up second. And then we have Aurora Star Coral. This unit has 3 skills, where the first skill is a constant where it gives all Coral units essentially plus 5k shield, and then act once per turn, put a card from hand into soul and draw a card. If you put a card with Coral in its name by this ability, this unit get at the end of the battle this unit attack, choose one of your rare card and stand it until end of turn. Do note this cost essentially free. And then auto, at the beginning of your battle phase, energy blast 4 of your front row unit get 5k until end of turn for every 2 cards with Corals in their name in your soul. And if your opponent Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this unit get critical plus 1 until end of turn.
Damn boy, he's thick!
This is a reason why I say that running grade 0 Coral is a necessity in this deck, because as you reach the grade 3 Coral and you use her ability for the first time, that essentially is 4 different Coral in your soul, which equates to plus 10k as early as turn 3, which is quite a substantial amount, especially most of the Coral regard do gain its own power, and the critical is really nice. With all of this element alone, it is safe to say that Coral prefer to go second just for that additional energy you can get from going second, which allow you to more or less guarantee that you have more or less energy blast for Coral skill almost every turn.
And that's extra crit also, of course.
But I do have to say this card do have a problem as well. As much as she has a really good start, she start to struggle as you try to get more Coral cards in the soul, because of the fact that for one, we only have 4 different Coral cards in the standard at the moment in total, and secondly, if you cannot persona right, you will not guarantee plus 2 Coral in soul every turn. And this also lead to, in my opinion, one of the biggest problem with Coral Coral. If you manage to have Coral in your hand during your turn, this deck will just go off. But if you don't, this deck loses a lot of offensive capability. Yes, you still can get the energy blast fall to get the huge power boost to the front row, but if you cannot set up properly to begin with, this is kind of useless. And at the time of recording, there is no other way of fetching Coral aside from just hard drawing it or searching it through Fresh Star Coral skill. And do note, this problem will coming back on later as I talk about the rest of Coral support. And I'm gonna be going through the main one only because, you know, the rest of the Coral support is skippable.
No, he's got a point.
As we're starting off with the grade 1 support of this deck, and we have Singular Heart Lurica. This card has ability where when this unit boosts and if you have Coral Vanguard, you can choose Coral card from your drop and put it into your soul. At the end of the battle, if you still have 4 more cards with Coral in their names and you did not counter charge this turn, you can retire this card to do a counter charge.
It's actually quite nice.
This is pretty decent and very good for Coral deck in general because most of the counter charge in Radical in general are incompatible with this deck due to the fact that Coral is a very soul heavy unit, and the fact that this can be activated as early as turn 1 also means that this allows you to discard Coral for your right deck cost as well. But of course, be careful if you want to discard the Coral in the earlier part of the game because you might not have Coral to actually start your engine later on. So it really depends on your deck build personally, because in my deck I did not run that many copies of the Grade 0 Coral.
Are you fucking dumb?
And then we move on to the grade 2 of this deck, and we have Diva of Resonating Stars Lulantiel. This unit has 2 skills where when placed on record by any means, counterblast 1 and choose 1 Coral card from your drop, put it into your hand. And then this unit gets 5k power and shield when your soul has 4 or more Coral units inside. And this does active during opponent turn as well. In all fairness, I feel this is a card that you prefer to have it earlier part of the game, as this allows you to discard Coral early and actually recycle it back to guarantee that you have a Coral by turn 3 later on.
Why, that's very good.
But overall, I do think this is a very decent card in itself, as it does gain its own power for 1, which means that you don't have to 100% piggyback on Coral third skill. And then last but not least, we have Luminus Melody Indonesia. This unit has 2 skills where when it's in attack, if your soul has 4 more cards with Coral in their name, counterblast 1, draw a card, and this unit get 5k until the end of that battle. Do note, this is not once per turn. And then at the end of your turn, if your soul has 4 more cards with Coral in their name, Soul Blast 1 and you may return this unit to hand. The Soul Blast one is a little bit awkward for some people, but I think this is a nice way of essentially building up your hand if needed to, in case of your opponent is capable of controlling. And as I mentioned just now, her draw skill is not tied to once per turn. You can use Coral to restand her to get additional 2 draws. Do note, as much as Coral don't really require a lot of counterblast, you do use it once in a while, so balance it will be a way to go for this deck. Overall, I have to say Coral is a very solid encounter deck on launch, and this is a good trend because last time we get the encounter right line was Dayusha, which was a solid right line as well. In general, Coral has a really good power gaining supply, meanwhile also has a really solid support to carry it on. The deck also have a decent shield economy as long as you manage to draw a lot of Coral cards during the earlier part of the game, and that is where her biggest weakness lies as well. Coral cannot function without Coral cards in your hand because of her second skill. Yes, the drawing power is decent enough for a recall deck, but here's the thing with Coral. She tends to have a really poor synergy with 80% of the generic cards that any recall deck can actually use. Means that Coral cannot really take advantage of cards like Straya or Order Engine to actually make use of her skill because of the Soul Blast, and even if you want to use more counter charge, those counter charge cards also use Soul. I would say Coral is a very good budget deck.
It's time to stop!
If you just buy the playset from the booster directly, but to upgrade her is a little bit hard because she doesn't have a lot of compatible support, aside from her own of course. But that's Coral. In my opinion, this is the best iteration of her I have seen so far, but I'm not a Coral fan, so do leave down in the comments below whether you guys actually like the deck or not. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Take care of yourself, don't forget to clap that sub or become a member for cool perks, and this is Mac Megane signing out.